So with shows like Invincible and The Boys coming out and really in the mainstream, popularizing the evil Superman trope with the help of games like Injustice and its accompanying comic series, I figured it'd be fun to dive into this concept and also acknowledge the merit of the standard Superman trope as well, because I feel like in the current day, it doesn't get its shine in the same way that it really should. So let me start off by saying that I absolutely adore The Boys and the Invincible comic. I genuinely feel like they are extremely well written. They're extremely well done. The idea of an overwhelming Superman-like force turning against their respective adoptive homeworlds is really an interesting concept. Um, One praise I will give toward the Invincible comic series, and this is spoilers and potential spoilers for the comic and potentially the show. The show runs a slightly different route than the comic, but it's basically the same, if that makes sense. It's slightly different routes to get to the same place. Um, but as I said, spoilers, but I found the idea of Nolan being redeemed in the comics to be pretty interesting. I would like to see how they do that in the show, as his actions, in my opinion, in the show were far, far more reprehensible. With the splattering hundreds of civilians in a in a subway. It's going to be interesting to see how he gets the world to forgive him for that. But uh, in the comics, if I remember correctly, he just kills the Guardians of the Globe and beats the absolute dog shit out of Mark. But I found that take on it interesting because it showed a certain it subverted your expectation in that you believed Mark would probably have to kill his father, but it doesn't end up working out that way, and that's something I actually enjoyed. And you get to see a redemption arc, which everyone loves to see. You love to see it. It also takes an interesting view and an interesting look at the concept of colonialism. And while this is largely explored in um, postmodern and modern literature, um, it's interesting to see it through the view of a comic and a Superman kind of situation. It really the takes the wind out of like the manifest destiny kind of thing, where just because the Viltrumites are powerful, it doesn't mean that they're inherently right in what they're doing. But that's kind of the central question of the story. Does might make right? And if it doesn't, then what does make right? And exploring that question is really what a lot of Invincible is about, at least for the Viltrumite characters. And to get onto the topic of the boys, to explain Homelander a bit, another interesting evil Superman sub archetype that's been emerging is the mentally unhinged psychotic version. You see this in Irredeemable as well, with the Plutonian. I don't want to talk a whole lot about him because I'd like to make a separate video for him specifically because I have a lot to say about him. But Homelander is interesting because he is an unapologetic asshole. He is a sadist. He is narcissistic. He tortures people. He immolates people. We see multiple times in the show he gets off on the murders he's committing. And it's it's an interesting situation with him because with the world they've set up, no one can really challenge him in the same way that in Invincible we have a set up physical challenge for Nolan, which is Mark. You knew that Nolan would be defeated by someone, even if it wasn't Mark, because there are other powerful beings in that universe. But for the boys, initially you don't really have a character that can outright match Homelander. And you have people who pose a threat like Billy and the rest of the boys and Stillwell and Edgar, but no one at the end of the day could stop Homelander from outright flattening the country if he really felt like it. And that's an interesting concept because with Homelander, the only thing keeping him from killing everyone is that he is so narcissistic that he has to have that public adoration. That adoration is what he lives off of, and if he doesn't have it, then he will go completely off the rails and he'll have really nothing to live for, which is it it's a very strange concept in the show because they explore ideas such as an Oedipal complex, which he has towards Madeline Stillwell, who is kind of a surrogate mother figure for him. But it's an interesting concept because he didn't grow up with your apple pie Superman American life, and therefore he could never grow up to be Superman because he was bred in a lab to be this all powerful savior for humanity. But if you never interact with humanity at before the age of 15 or 16, really, you're probably going to come out a little fucked up. And we see that in the show. We see he is a fucked up individual, to say the least. And Injustice Superman also kind of fits both of these archetypes in an interesting way because he takes over the world himself. And I wouldn't say he's really a colonial power as his people die off, as people are dead. It's these people are dead because it's Krypton. Everybody knows that story. But he does fit the supposed might makes right kind of archetype at the end of the show, or at the end of the game rather, because he's willing to try to subjugate his kingdom, he views it, with his power to try to force them to listen to him. And he begins on this road with the best of intentions after the Joker tricks him into killing his wife and unborn child, Lois Lane, through the use of kryptonite laced scarecrow fear toxin. And it's terrible because before this before this one bad day, to make a Joker reference, it we see that he's the normal apple pie American Superman that we all know and love, but he snaps and he takes over the world, and he even has Alfred murdered for outright verbally challenging him. Just to give an example of something fucked up he did in the comic series. But it's different with this universe because you have many characters who can outright defeat or challenge Superman. You have Wonder Woman, you have characters like Batman, who's his only real opposition, um, his only real consistent opposition. But in my opinion, this is the best example of the evil Superman archetype. And that's for a few reasons. Some of them actually external to his character, but the first is more than with Nolan, and certainly more than with Homelander, we genuinely empathize with Superman. We know he's a good person previous to his fall from grace. We know, and we can understand why he does the things that he does. Whereas we can't really sympathize as much with Nolan's crusade to subjugate humanity, and we can't at all sympathize or empathize with Homelander because he's fucking Homelander and he's crazy. But with Nolan, to circle back, we empathize with his internal struggle that we see that he's having, but that's more removed from his actual motivations. Whereas with Superman in Injustice, we see him as a scared but benevolent being. He goes off the rails trying to save as many people who are dear to him as possible. And that's what is so cool about that story in particular, is that Superman never does anything in the first bit of the comic, in the first, I would say, three seasons of the comic, that does not come with the best of intentions. But as we all know, the road of hell is paved with the best of intentions. And it's interesting because we see a lot of his fall comes from just not being able to rein in his fear and just try to be himself again. And he is a character, Superman inspires hope in his universe. He is the ultimate superhero. He is nearly undefeatable when he is trying, which is kind of an annoying concept with him, but it's just something you kind of have to roll with. The fact that Superman, if he's losing, he's probably not trying, unless it's to a reality warper.
But you can take it, can't you, big man? What we have here is a rare opportunity for me to cut loose and show you just how powerful I really am.
But Superman's normal apple pie good guy persona is extremely underrated at the moment, in my opinion. And I think we're going to come out of this evil Superman hype genre with with a renewed respect for that classic idea of the good, virtuous Superman. Because at the end of the day, Superman, while he is extremely overpowered in a lot of ways, he represents an interesting and unique trope in that he doesn't protect humanity because he is a god or out of any preconceived superiority. He protects humanity because it's his home. Superman is a chill ass dude. Superman, he's very similar to Spider-Man in how wholesome he is a lot of the time. He is summed up greatly by Spider-Man's mantra of with great power also comes great responsibility. Superman views it as his responsibility to protect his adoptive homeworld, not out of obligation, as I mentioned earlier, but out of the fact that he loves the place. He grew up on this planet. He believes in our values. He is human to the core, and taking an alien godlike being and humanizing him so much and making him so empathetic and charismatic and interesting in so many of his plots and so many of his stories is really a feat of writing, and it's something I very much admire that DC has been able to do over the years. They've made missteps here and there with some of their weirder arcs, especially during the Silver Age, but just Superman's overall persona of this goody two shoes Boy Scout is it works perfectly in the universe that it is built in. And I don't think modern literature would be the same at all without the Superman archetype.